All right, let's get right into it. Picture this. You've packed your bags, maybe you're heading to a wedding or a vacation you've been looking forward to for months. You get to the airport and it's just complete and utter chaos. Well, that was the reality for thousands of people across India recently, when the country's biggest airline, IndiGo, was plunged into a massive travel crisis. So we're going to unpack exactly what went wrong here.
You know, it's one thing to hear about travel headaches, but it's another thing entirely to live through them. And this quote, this really hits home. It's from a top diplomat who is stuck right there in the thick of it with everyone else, and even missed a colleague's wedding because of it. It just goes to show this wasn't some minor inconvenience. For a lot of people, it was deeply personal.
And the scale of this was just wow. We are talking hundreds of flights just wiped off the departure boards, leaving thousands upon thousands of people completely stranded all over the country. For so many, especially flying out of the capital, Delhi, it was basically a total shutdown.
So first, let's talk about that chaos at the airport. Let's really get into the on-the-ground reality for the people who are caught right in the middle of what became a systemic meltdown.
Now, to really grasp how big of a deal this was, you have to understand that IndiGo isn't just an airline in India, it is the airline. It controls a whopping 60% of the domestic market and runs something like 2,000 flights every single day. So yeah, when IndiGo has a problem, the entire country's travel network feels the shockwaves.
And the timing? It honestly could not have been worse. This all blew up in December, smack in the middle of school holidays and the peak wedding season in India. You're talking about a time when people have booked trips months, maybe even a year in advance, for these huge life events that you just can't reschedule.
Okay, so we've seen the chaos, we understand the fallout, but what actually caused it all? Well, the root of the problem was a sudden, pretty critical pilot shortage. But the real question is, how does that just happen overnight?
And the answer lies right here, in something called Flight Duty Time Limitations, or FDTL. In short, India's aviation regulator brought in some brand new, much stricter rules to make sure pilots get more rest. It's all about fighting fatigue, which, as you can imagine, is a huge deal when it comes to flight safety.
And these changes were not small. Just look at this. Under the old rules, a pilot could do up to 6 night landings in a week. The new rules, they slashed that down to just 2. On top of that, they increased the amount of mandatory rest time. So the bottom line is, you suddenly need a whole lot more pilots to fly the same number of planes.
And this is where everything started to unravel. According to India's aviation regulator, IndiGo had, and I'm quoting here, misjudgment and planning gaps. Basically, the airline just failed. They didn't adjust their crew schedules to account for these new, tougher rest rules. And almost instantly, they didn't have enough pilots who were legally allowed to fly.
So this failure created this massive showdown, safety rules versus packed schedules. It really became a three-way standoff, right? You had the new safety regulations on one side, the airline's jam-packed schedule on the other, and caught in between were the key players, the government, the airline, and, of course, the pilots.
The official reactions came in hot and fast. The regulator pointed the finger squarely at IndiGo for its bad planning. The federal government made it known they were not happy, expressing clear displeasure. And IndiGo's response to all this? They actually asked for temporary relief from the very safety rules they hadn't planned for in the first place.
But the Pilots Association, they pushed back, and they pushed back hard. Their position was crystal clear. You can't give the airline a pass on this, not even for a little while. They argued that doing so would gravely compromise passenger safety. I mean, that really puts into perspective the life or death stakes we're talking about here.
All this finger-pointing and conflict at the top has very real consequences on the ground. So let's get practical. If you were one of those thousands of passengers holding a ticket, what did all of this actually mean for you?
So let's break down what this meant for travelers. How do you navigate this kind of disruption, and what are your options?
Now, the airline did take a few steps. As you can see on this timeline, for about 10 days in early December, they waived fees for cancellations and rescheduling. Then on December 8th, they started proactively cutting flights to try and get a handle on things. But look at that last date. They weren't expecting things to get back to full normalcy until February 10th. That is a long, long time to be in crisis mode.
The advice that came out from major airports was simple, but absolutely crucial. Number 1, always check your flight status before you even think about leaving for the airport. 2, get in touch with the airline directly. Social media can be a mess of rumors, but the airline is your source for real-time info. And 3, know your rights. When there are major disruptions, you're often entitled to things like refunds, a hotel, and food.
So as we wrap this up, it really boils down to one fundamental question, doesn't it? This whole crisis was born from a head-on collision between non-negotiable safety rules and an airline's super aggressive schedule. And when those two things collide, who ends up paying the price? Well, as we saw here time and time again, it's the passenger, the person stranded at the gate just trying to get where they need to go.